Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and chat with amazing humans about their journeys with mental health. For this episode, I'm so happy to introduce Tal Zlotnitsky to the conversation. Welcome, Tal.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
Brilliant. And as you probably can hear, Tal is from the US, or he's based in the US, based in Florida, right?
I am indeed. I'm in Tampa Bay. Beautiful, sunny Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and we're recording this in December where it's a little bit cold here in the UK, but it's a pleasure to see you, Tal. As always, just a brief introduction how we got to record this session. I'll let you do a proper introduction to yourself in a moment, let people know who you are and what you do. But Tal actually reached out to me, which is lovely. I really enjoy when people reach out to me and say, I've got a story. Would you like to talk about it? I'd love to share that with you and record an episode of the podcast together. And of course, when anybody does that, I love the opportunity to sit down and chat about these subjects. So welcome, Tal. I'll let you do a proper introduction to yourself. I'll let people know who you are, what you do.
Sure. So as you said, my name is Tal Zlatnitsky. I am actually a native of Israel, but I've lived in the United States since I was 12 years old, and I'm just shy of 48 years old. So you do the math. I am the CEO of a startup company called Our.Love, a recent startup, which is my sixth startup and one I'm very excited about. I am a proud father of three beautiful children. My daughter, Sophia, is 27. I have a 23-year-old daughter, Eleni, and my son, Jacob, is 19.
Excellent stuff. And before we get into the real conversation, just to let everybody know, we both actually support the same Premier League football team. I won't share which team it is, just in case anybody wants to judge us on our choices. But let's just say, it's a great team.
And it's a great team, and I am proud to say I'm headed to the UK this Friday. I will be catching two games along with my son. We are both diehard fans of, may I say it?
Say it.
Everton, baby.
Oh, come on, you Blues. There we go. So apologies for anybody that's now switching off because they don't like us anymore. Yes. But anyway, let's get into the big conversation. So, maybe that's a conversation in itself as well. But Tal, so the big part
that's
of
a mental health question right there, being an Everton or not.
Maybe it is, yeah. So the big question for these is always around the journey that you've been on, the journey of mental health, and how you define it is entirely up to you. But I'd love you to please tell us a story. Let us know a little bit about what's been going on.
Sure. My story is interesting because in some ways I experienced my 15 minutes of fame when I was 6 and 7 years old. I was a star, and I put stars in quotation marks because it was in a very small country, but in the state of Israel at the time, there was a single television channel, and I was on the Israeli Sesame Street for several years. And so I was famous in the country. In my very small town, I was by far the most popular and well-known citizen, and certainly boy in the school, which made me quite popular with my fellow children. And then at the age of 12, my parents made a decision that floored me to move to the United States with very little notice. I had two older brothers who were staying behind, and my parents and I moved to the United States. I didn't speak English, and my first year in the United States was extremely difficult. I was bullied. I faced some anti-Semitism for the first time in my life. Obviously, having grown up in Israel, I wasn't exposed to that. And it dramatically impacted the rest of my life. For years afterwards, every time I would hear laughter, I would assume it was about me. And it took a lot of time, a lot of effort, and quite a lot of years for me to be able to complete this journey. Obviously, I'm not completed altogether, but get to a point in my life where it no longer defines me. I did my very best to fit in. I did it mainly through playing sports. I was a very talented soccer player or football player. Of course, the United States in the 1980s was not exactly a football hotbed like it is now. I actually think the United States now has a great chance to do well in the World Cup, but we'll leave that for a different conversation. At the time, being a great football player, and I was a goalkeeper, wasn't as great of a resume builder as it would be now. And so I actually picked up the American sport of baseball, and I became a very good player. In fact, my senior year of high school, I won the league most valuable player, and I eventually played a couple of years semi-pro baseball. But the impact of that first year in the United States left a major imprint on me, and on multiple levels. First, I lacked confidence. I felt very uneasy being around people that were more popular than me or more attractive than me. And I was constantly measuring myself up against people that I didn't, frankly, have any reason to measure myself up against, just because I was constantly trying to fit in. And it caused me to make decisions in my life that shaped my life. I chose to marry very young, at the age of 20, and before I knew it, I had 2 children, and I was in my mid-20s when my first wife chose, and I say chose, and maybe wasn't so much of a choice. She had substance abuse issues, and she left us. So when my daughters were 5 and 1.5 years old, I suddenly found myself as a single dad. And let me tell you, being a young man and a single dad, and at the time I was also starting my career and beginning to start companies and kind of finding my professional footing, was a huge challenge. And it continued me down a path of decisions that were made not necessarily because I had carefully deliberated about the future I wanted to carve for myself, but I was constantly playing defense and trying to do the right thing by whoever I was responsible for. When I was a child and my parents had just immigrated here, I constantly felt responsible for them. And you know, their English wasn't as good as mine. They both struggled, at least in the early goings, career-wise. And I felt an obligation not to burden them with the things that were going wrong in my life. And so my parents didn't even know that I was getting bullied. They didn't know that, for example, at least 1 or 2 days a week, I'd actually hide from the school bus. I'd leave the house, go to the bus stop, hide behind a tree, not go to school, wait for my parents to go to work, and then I'd get back in the house because I just couldn't stand the bullying. So with 2 young daughters, I found myself thinking that the most important thing I could do is ensure that they had a stable home and a mom. And I very quickly started searching for that. I started searching for what I hoped would be a perfect mom, and I was very fortunate to meet a kind and lovely woman whom I was married to for 20 years. And for many of those years, I think we both agree we weren't the best fit for each other. But in my case, having already watched my daughters lose one mom, it was very, very important to me that they, heaven forbid, not lose another. And so for that reason, I stayed married substantially longer, I think, than was appropriate based on how we got along. So it's been a continuous struggle, some of which is rooted in just feeling exposed and vulnerable at a very young age and not coming to any kind of a resolution about it for a very long time.
Right. Wow. And thank you for sharing all of that. And
Yeah.
It's interesting, you know, you picked up early on the words bullying and being bullied. And, you know, one of the interesting sort of dynamics around sort of the development of mental illness is, you know, a lot of people struggle with being bullied at some point in their lives. And how did you sort of address those bullies, or how did that sort of change for you, Tal? Can you sort of define that a little bit more?
You know, it's interesting. I would say that I didn't really address it. I avoided them as best as I could.
Right.
You know, interestingly, there was one young man who bullied me pretty badly. And by happenstance, a few years later, I'd long lost touch with him. It turned out he was a fraternity brother of a friend of mine at a college not too far from where I was going to school. And we had this uneasy, you know, I mean, we were reintroduced and he was older and wiser and he did not bully me, but there was this overhang that was never addressed. And for many, many years, the topic wasn't touched upon. And actually it was within the last couple of years, as I was coming to terms with a bunch of things in my life and choosing to make a dramatic change, that he and I reconnected on Instagram, of all places. And I had the opportunity to forgive him. He acknowledged that he had done wrong by me, and I told him that you know bygones are bygones. But unfortunately, I think my way of dealing with the bullies was to run. I asked my parents at the end of my first school year if they would move me to a different school. I confided in them for the first time that I'd been bullied, and they did move me to a different school, and so in effect, I'm a bit ashamed to say that I as opposed to putting up a fight, I actually ran away. That was my initial reaction to the bullying.
Yeah, but you opened up to your parents, and you had that ability to talk to them.
A little bit, right? I wouldn't say that, I mean, there was all still the degree of concern about how difficult their lives were, right? My parents were working 2 and 3 jobs each, and just trying to get by, and it really felt unkind to put my burdens on them. And as a parent myself, I think I now appreciate that they probably would have loved it if I did fully confide, but at the time I felt an obligation to protect them.
Sure, no, and of course, and coming to a country where the language is is a barrier if you can't speak, and you're not able to communicate properly, and it must have been very, very challenging for them as well. It's interesting because obviously you were then left, when you had your children, you were left to look after your children. How did you manage to build that into your sort of everything you were doing at the time? How was that?
Well, the first thing I did is I actually moved back in with my parents temporarily, right? Okay. I was very fortunate that my mom at that point was retired, and she was able to lend a hand. And I was also very fortunate that my daughters were both well-behaved and kind girls.
That helps, yeah.
And despite the horror of their birth mother walking out on them and really all but disappearing from their lives, and they've seen her a handful of times since, and they're now in their 20s. They were resilient. Kids are incredibly resilient, and I think what I learned from them was just having a strong, reliable father was enough. That's not to say that they didn't suffer trauma. Certainly they did, and both of them went through significant difficulties at different points in their lives, particularly their teenage years. Okay. But they both emerged from it stronger. So what I did initially was rely on my parents, and then shortly after that, I was able to I found a wonderful nanny housekeeper that stayed with me until my girls were older. In fact, she stayed with me and then my wife until our son was 5 or 6 years old, and my son is now 19. So I mean, it was to be honest, I feel like a lot of that time in my life has just melted from memory, right? I don't remember the details, but I remember events. I remember, my ex-wife had mental health issues, and at some point threatened our lives, and we had to get a restraining order against her. And I actually remember one night, where in the middle of the night, I don't remember the cause or the prompt, but there was a reason to believe that she may be heading over and may have a weapon. And I remember the woman who at the time was my girlfriend, then became my wife. We rushed our daughters into the car and we ran away to a hotel in an hour north of where we lived. So there was a whole bunch of trauma and at some point just resilience takes over, right? I mean, I think what I did, and I think with the help of my wife, who was I was very fortunate to meet her when I did. We created a new normal for the girls.
Yeah. Wow, it's such an interesting sort of perspective that you're sharing with me, and with anybody that's listening as well, with the people that are listening. In terms of sort of the conversations with your children now, do you talk about any of those, or is that sort of past history? We've left it, we move along, we get away from that. Do they ever come back and ask you questions?
We've spoken about it quite a bit, because I felt that being transparent about it was important, and I also made some decisions at that time that I'm proud of. My ex, her parents were kind people, and they stayed involved in their granddaughter's lives, even as their daughter disappeared from their lives. So they built a strong bond with their grandmother that their grandfather passed away, unfortunately, about 10 years ago, but their grandmother is still alive, and they're still very loving and very kind to her. And she recently suffered a stroke, and and both my daughters rushed to her bedside and were extremely lovely to her. So, that's one aspect that's been there. We have spoken candidly about their birth mother more so as they became older, and I could candidly tell them some of what I went through and some of what I try to protect them from. At the time that they were younger, there were these, every year and a half or so, she would reappear. There would be a new boyfriend in her life who wouldn't know the history and would just, be enamored with her good looks and assume that somebody has wronged her and sue us. And so time and again, there would be this new lawsuit for visitation or something else. And time and again, she'd fall off the wagon and disappear again. So during those times, I'm very proud. My wife and I did a great job protecting them from it. And their childhoods were more or less normal. And I say more or less because there were challenges, frankly, even within the marriage, by the fact that, my wife was not their birth mother. And there were some conflicts that I think were probably rooted in that. Some that were as a result of my unfairly judging certain things that my wife would do as being unkind or unmotherly, and her feeling judged, and that in turn creating a vicious cycle. And obviously, teenagers are notoriously difficult. And as my daughters went through their teenage years, some of that came to the forefront, and they not being biologically related to the woman they called mom and who is their mom and has been their mom, it created some strifes. There were moments of conflict with both girls and moments of crisis with both girls, including with my middle daughter Eleni, a period of time where her behavior was so unreliable and she was putting herself at risk, that we put her in a program for girls that were misbehaving. And for several months, she actually lived out in the woods. It was a wilderness program where she lived among girls and learned. And I would say, she would tell you that program changed her life in a good way. And she remains close to some of the girls that she met there and to some of the leaders in the program. At the time, of course, she hated us for it, as you might imagine. And I felt huge conflict about sending my child away to live in the woods, literally, Robinson Crusoe style, right? But the end result now, in hindsight, is that it helped her be the person she is. She is 3 months away from graduating as a registered nurse, and I'm extremely proud of her.
Wow, and you should be as well. It sounds like she's been on an incredible journey herself, and all of our children and all of our, those people around us, we've all been on an incredible journey, actually. Sometimes, and you should be so proud of that and amazing.
Well, in the case of my oldest daughter, Sophia, she was born with some after effects of my ex using while pregnant with her, and that has caused Sophia hardship in her life. When she was 7 years old and just entering first grade, we were told she'd never learn to read and write, and that at best we could hope that she would be able to function as an adult in the world without some basic life skills. We didn't accept that, and quite frankly, neither did she. We were very fortunate that she was fortunate that we had resources to help her. We were fortunate that she has a very resilient soul and a determination to achieve. And I could tell you that not only did she learn to read and write, she went on to graduate a 4-year college, and she's now in the United States Navy. So she's done remarkably well, and we're extremely proud of her for that. But there were many difficult moments, moments where she doubted herself, and frankly, we doubted her also. I mean, it's not easy when you have a child that has limitations. It's not easy to let it be, let them go. You're always afraid they're going to get hurt. You're always trying to protect them, sometimes to their detriment. But all's well that ends well, and I'm very proud of her.
It sounds like they've got a really supportive parent there, Tal. So I'm proud of you for what you've done for your children and what you've given to them and what you've shared with them, and through your own experiences, you've obviously raised some very capable young adults, right? That's what it's all about. So well done on that. I do want to move towards the career elements. Just, you know,
Yeah,
we've
sure.
got about 10 minutes or so to go. So I
Yeah,
want to make sure we cover
yeah,
this, because I really want to
of
get to
course.
understanding a bit more about how
Yeah,
did Our.Love start? But of course, you've got a long career ahead before that. And
yeah,
I think it's a
sure.
career entrepreneur is the word that you use on your message that you sent to me. So just briefly, just
Yeah.
explain what's been going on.
Sure. Well, you know, my very first business ended disastrously. I
Okay.
literally blew myself up and had to be helicoptered to the hospital with burns all over my
What?
arms and my face. Yeah, it's a long story. I was 19 years old. I was in college. You know, I started a painting business. I hired a bunch of college kids to paint. They couldn't care less about quality. At some point, I just fired them all and started doing all the work by myself. And I was trying to finish all the jobs I had committed to before the end of the summer. And so I was basically working 18-hour days. And this nice elderly lady asked me to power wash her deck. I should have said no. I said yes. I was exhausted. I forgot to turn off the power washer when I was refilling it with fuel, and it blew up. And so my plan from there was never to do any business again. I was going to do something entirely different.
Yeah.
But you know, as luck would have it, my brothers and my father started a company distributing newspapers of all things, and they earned a very large contract. And I remember being brought into my parents' kitchen. I was a junior in college, and I was told, look, the family's just gotten this great opportunity, and this is a once in a lifetime, and we need you to lean in and help. And so I thought I was doing it for a short time, but you know, literally 20 years later, I was the CEO of that company, which, you know, had grown from from that kitchen table of that very modest home into a very large company with tens of thousands of customers and hundreds of millions of dollars in transactions. Wow. And 2,000 associates. And it was a great business that we ran until we sold it in 2008 to a big international conglomerate. And at that point, my brother and I have two brothers. My brothers and I started several companies. Two of them became prominent. One of them, I Control Mobile. It was a predecessor to Park Mobile, which is now a very large international mobile parking company. Yeah. We sold that company to Ringo, a UK company, in 2010. And at the same time, we had started I Control Data, which is now a large business-to-business payments company with also tens of thousands of customers and billions of dollars in transactions. So until 2020, I was pretty much living the American dream. I'd done quite well for myself. I was active in social causes that matter a lot to me, particularly around immigration rights and worker rights and fair wages and fair taxation. And then, COVID hit, right? And a couple of things happened at the beginning of 2020 that really disrupted my life. One was my company lost a lawsuit. It was an unjust, lawsuit, and we lost it. It caused us tremendous hardship. It felt as if my life's work was collapsing around me. We were looking at potential bankruptcy, and it was completely unfair. And in order to resolve that, I essentially had to go hat in hand and get some of our investors to lean in quite heavily into the company. And our investors are large companies like Goldman Sachs and other prominent investors. And to their credit, they were very supportive. And ultimately, we were able to salvage the company. But for me, that was the first nail in the coffin in terms of me being willing to continue to devote my life to just business for the sake of business. It was a real rude awakening that just one unfortunate event could cause such disruption and potentially cause a great company to nearly collapse. And the company has recovered and is doing well. But I made a decision at that point that I wanted to go do something else with my life. Now, two other events that occurred concurrent with that was the end of my marriage. I'd been married for just under 20 years. I'd been with my wife for 22. We had raised our two daughters together. My two daughters from my first marriage, and we also raised our son. But our marriage suffered many ups and downs, and I think we both realized that we were not happy together, and the decision to go down a different path was a difficult one, but the right one, and I think the right one for both of us. So I was dealing with that, and then the final nail in the coffin was that my daughter Eleni was sick. She was diagnosed with cancer. Fortunately, she's doing extremely well. and is cancer free. But at the time, we obviously needed to deal with that, and she had to undergo surgery. So all of these things occurring all at once really hammered me. And, and then of course, COVID. And so here I am, I've been traveling, 3-4 days a week for 20 years.
Yep.
Suddenly I'm home, and what I could spend my time doing, obviously I was working, but I was also deeply depressed. I think I was clinically depressed. I had a very difficult time getting out of bed in the morning. I had a very difficult time keeping myself motivated. I had thoughts of suicide. A lot of things went through my mind. What got me out of it, I think ultimately was two things. One, my dog, and I wish you could see him. He's laying right here next to me on the carpet, resting. But we went on many, many long walks together, and he was such a loving companion. Yeah. And on those walks, I spent a lot of time listening to podcasts on love and on mental health and on life. And I made the decision right around the beginning of the summer of 2020 that what I wanted to do was start a company to help people love more and better. And I know that sounds kind of weird, right? I mean, here I am, someone who's failed at love twice. Right. How am I at all qualified to try to help people love more and better? Well, I'm not, but what I am very good at is bringing people together and creating a team that is driven and motivated and focused. I've done that repeatedly in business, and I saw this as a business challenge. My challenge was assemble the best minds and give them the resources and set the direction that I wanted to go on, and then lean into their talents and their knowledge to build the right solution. And that's kind of where we are.
Incredible. I find it fascinating. You think about that journey from where you've been with your previous businesses to where you are now with this whole concept around sort of love. I was going to say I love it, but that sounds a bit cheesy, doesn't it? But so what is it? Tell me, just give us a quick description of what it is that you're trying to do with this.
Absolutely. So, I'll put it to you this way. The app is going to be available in the App Store on Valentine's Day 2022. So February 14th, 2022, okay. You'll be able to download it at the App Store in both the iPhone and Android. What the app is going to do is it's going to provide a couple with a grounding around a virtual relationship home. So whether you live in a beautiful home, or you live in a rented apartment, or you're living with your parents, and you're just starting out in your lives, our idea is to give couples a virtual grounding in a virtual home, right? And in this virtual home, they're going to have access to content. They're going to have access to an actual virtual home in which they can decorate and they can do fun things. Right. But the object is to give them the baseline, the information that they need to first know where they are in their relationship. So one of the real significant missing elements to me is that we don't know where we stand. Imagine not knowing how much money you have in your bank and trying to write checks, right? I mean, there's certain minimum degree of knowledge necessary to do well. And for some reason, when it comes to relationships, we've been flying by the seat of our pants. We have not demanded that there is some degree of baseline accountability where we and our partner have a shared understanding of where the relationship stands. And so we are going to center the app on a relationship tracker that's going to give you and your partner a real-time visual and a real-time sense of where you stand around 7 critical love skills, okay, and in 5 life journeys that are essential to understand. So for starters, we're going to have that baseline. Then we're going to provide our couples with tools and resources so that as the relationship ebbs and flows, which they'll be able to track on the relationship tracker, they have the resources that they need, the tools that they need to overcome challenges and be able to build on successes.
Wow, it sounds fascinating. So it's going to be February next year on Valentine's Day, the 14th. So
well, let's make sure that when we say next year, we mean just a few weeks away, right? This is December of course. So we are literally just 45 business days away from the product being launched. Our.Love, it's not our.love.com. It's just www.our.love is already up. And you can access it. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can sign up to be among the first users and be notified when we're out in the App Store. But in essence, it boils down to this, right? We no longer need to wonder what it takes to love, because the reality is, and this is something I found as I was walking with my dog and listening to all these podcasts and reading all these books, is the science of relationship wellness is well established. It's been well established for 40 plus years. And I am extremely fortunate to have recruited incredible scientists onto my team, including Dr. Richard Safir, the Chief Medical Director of Health and Wellbeing for Johns Hopkins. So we've recruited incredible scientists, and they've helped me understand that the challenge is not the science. The challenge is the application of the science. And so what we are attempting to do is give people tools so that applying the principles is as straightforward as, say, scheduling something on your calendar, right? So today, we have already, in the modern era we live in, we already know to lean into technology to help us manage things that should not be managed in our heads. How many of us manage our calendars in our heads? Hardly any of us. And the vast majority of us use electronics for our calendar, not even a paper. Very few of us do balance our checkbook by hand, right? We have come to a place where we know to rely on technology to give us process and order around things that need process and order. Now, love is not just about process and order, but it is also about process and order. So ultimately, what we're going to give our users, and we're going to call our users friends. So what we're going to give our friends who decide to download the app are the basic tools and the basic infrastructure that love requires in order to thrive. The rest is up to them. The rest is up to you, right? So if you're a listener and you're in a relationship that's not necessarily in deep trouble, we're not necessarily only looking to help people that are in deep trouble. Quite to the contrary, we think that the biggest area of the biggest opportunity, the biggest bang for the buck are for those couples where love is still there and they're just not sure exactly how to go about loving each other more and better. And we're going to give them the tools to do that.
Wow, incredible. And this is an evergreen podcast, so it might be that it's already released. So go and have a look for it if it is already released, right?
Absolutely.
I know we're 45 days away while we're recording it from the launch. You know, it's there. Tal, incredible. I could just listen and talk to you about this stuff forever. And that's what I love about these conversations is we sort of open up and it's, you know, can we really fill half an hour with a comment? Well, you know, we're well over half an hour now, but it's incredible. I will just say huge thank you, but I'm going to pass it to you just briefly, just the final thoughts, any comments or words of wisdom you want to share with people. But yeah, just a huge thanks from me to you.
Sure. Well,
any final thoughts, Tal?
My final thought is this, you know, one of the most underutilized resources on earth is love. It is available in abundance. There are no limits to it. There is no carbon footprint. You can have as much of it as you can get your hands on, and your neighbor will not be impacted. There will not be any less. And so the beauty of love is that it can always grow. And if you are in a relationship with someone that you think is worthy of you being in a relationship with them, right? Because if you don't think so, you know what, as we've seen in this era of post-COVID, people are quitting their jobs, people are moving on. If you're not ready to quit your relationship, and I hope you're not, double down, decide that your relationship is worthy of more investment, more planning, more time. And let me tell you, it's not hard work. It's literally just awareness and consciousness. And if you're not sure you can do it on your own, tools can help you with that. And so my last thoughts are, love is there to be had. If you want more of it, come and get it.
Brilliant. I love that. And I want more love and, you know, lots of hugs and things and everything else that goes around that. But it's interesting, isn't it? We're on the verge of the great resignation is what they're talking about now, isn't it? It's everybody's resigning. And actually, that's not just resigning from jobs, right? That's relationships. That's everything, you know, checking out from the things that we do is our normal everyday procedures and processes. So
that's right. It's time for change. People are ready for different. And, you know, one of the silver linings of the terrible couple of years that we've had, and let's hope that Omicron does not prove to extend it by another year or more. Let's knock on wood there. But to the extent that there is a silver lining, that silver lining is that we now have a greater appreciation for life and its worth and the opportunity to be on this beautiful planet and share it with people we love and have the opportunity to be better individuals, better parents, better partners, better colleagues. It's available to us. We just need to go and get it. And I think a huge swath of the population is ready to lean in. And I sure hope so.
Yeah, brilliant. Me too. I definitely do as well. Thank you so much, Tal. You're an amazing human. I wish you all the very best with your trip to the UK, and you know, fingers crossed for the results of the games as well.
Yeah.
You know, I lots of positive energy. I'm sure with you in the presence there, you'll make them play hard and win, of course. But all the best to you and your family and your girls and the journeys that everybody in your life is on, of course, and with your new venture with Our.Love. So all the best. Wish you well. Thanks so much for this. Appreciate it.
Total pleasure. Have a good one.